we made up this thing called headless because headless is a thing, right? And everybody went, oh, that's the new paradigm. And now it's not the new paradigm anymore.
Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Rose and Rockstar from the Rockstar CMO Effing Marketing Podcast. Firstly, apologies, I promised this yesterday, but this is the risk of recording and editing a show just in time, and sometimes things just come up. And my Saturday was spent, and I hope you don't mind, with my sister who travelled thousands of miles to be in the UK. So, it's Sunday, the 19th of January. I'm your host, Ian Truscott, and I'm not a rock star, but I am a CMO on a mission with my chums to share the marketing street knowledge that will bring out the Rockstar CMO in you. In a moment, I will join one of those chums, Robert Rose, the Chief Troublemaker from 7th Bear, in our virtual bar, the Rose and Rockstar. I'll grab a cocktail and then pick his brains on a marketing question I have this week. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to the bar. It's a great Saturday night here at the bar.
Thank you, mate. It's actually, I think you've been on the cocktails already, mate, 'cause it's Friday night, and I'm going to record this and send this on Saturday.
Oh, are you really? Well, you're just like too on it, I guess. You're just too all over it. It's Saturday where I live. How about that? By the time I get this, it's going to be Saturday.
Well, have we broken the fourth wall already of our little radio place?
Yeah, that's right. It's basically this podcast and Deadpool are your ways to break the fourth wall. Yeah.
Well, I'm delighted to be back in the bar, Robert. Thank you for welcoming me. What cocktail should we be winding the week down with this week?
We are going to go with a straight up tequila tonight. Sort of kick it back old school here. I was given a gift over the holidays, and it was given to me by my very good friend and colleague, Kathy McKnight, who you've had on one of your other shows before. And this is the tequila we'll be drinking tonight is called 8 Reserve. And it is there's a maker of it called 818 Añejo Reserve, and the bottle is very easy to spot because it's a shape of an 8. The bottle is just a shape of a big white 8. Mm-hmm. It is absolutely a beautiful, wonderful sipping añejo. We will be drinking it straight, no rock, no lime, nothing. Just poured into a beautiful. Wonderful sort of, not really a shot glass as much as is sort of just a sipping Scotch glass. And we will be sipping 8 Reserve as we sit by the fire here.
Nice. Thank you very much for that. And I'm gonna cut right to the chase here, Robert. I know that sometimes we chat about football and other stuff like we normally do in the bar, but I know that is not a topic we want to be hitting this evening. So I want to ask you a marketing question because I understand you dabble a little bit in the dark arts of marketing. Is that true?
Indeed.
One of the things I've noticed is we seem to be pivoting, and we kind of touched on this when we had our nice chat last week. We seem to be pivoting, and I like this expression. It comes from who was the chap who was the CMO of Demand Base and founder of Marketo? John somebody.
Oh, John Miller. Yep.
John Miller, yeah. So I read a prediction from John Miller about 2025, a really nice article that was on marketing profs that you might be familiar with. And he's talking about the idea that we need to pivot from the Gumball machine of MQLs. And he was talking about that we're sort of shifting our thinking. And he also combined that with another prediction about brand. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty familiar with what we were chatting about. And I've seen you comment about this on LinkedIn, that, you know, we've been a bit hooked on the crack pipe of data and everything being measurable. What do you think about the resurgence of brand in 2025? Are you in on that?
Well, 100% I'm in on it. I'm less convinced it's going to go that way for us. And the only reason I say that is because it seems to be a prediction every year. That we're finally going to recognize the importance, and this is especially true in B2B, but somewhat in B2C as well. I mean, B2C has always recognized the need for brand awareness and differentiation more than B2B.
Yeah.
B2B almost inevitably's knee-jerk reaction is, if I can't associate it with revenue, then it's not worth doing. And I would argue, of course, that brand differentiation is associative with revenue, but that's a different conversation. And I think the interesting and hopeful idea that I think John is talking about there is that it's time to make sure that we create trust and awareness, in a particularly noisy environment, that it's really incumbent upon marketing to invest in brand and trust, so that the number of leads or opportunities you're putting into your shopping cart or your funnel or whatever your metaphor is for the buyer's journey are already precluded to choose you over your competition. And it's, in many ways, this is a result of, one of the things that we don't talk a lot about in marketing and product and business. We talk a lot about the enabling aspects of technology, but what we don't talk about is, outside of marketing or outside of sort of infrastructure, what we don't talk about are the democratizing effects of technology more broadly. And what I mean by that is that increasingly, it doesn't kind of matter who you are. There are a number of challenger competitors to what you're doing at every turn, because it's just become cheaper to do so. Manufacturing is a great example of this, right? By some estimates, 90% of the costs of manufacturing have come out of the system because of the technology that's there. So, for example, product on demand and logistics and all those things are so much more efficient now that small manufacturers, small product companies can exist that didn't exist before, because the moat was just so wide with these larger companies that it couldn't matter. And so for both of those reasons, in other words, the small company as a challenger brand and the bigger company as trying to fend off the challenger brands, it becomes increasingly important to create brand and trust with audiences, because it's just too easy to choose a competitor these days. And I think that's really what John is getting at when he talks about this idea. And again, a little bit like we were talking about last week, I'm hopeful for it. I've been hopeful for it for the last few years. I have not seen it come to pass. Most companies, and especially again on the B2B side, are still in the show me the money direct marketing mode of working and sort of getting wrapped around the axle of MQLs and SQLs and sort of using that as a way, performance marketing, quote unquote.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in his post, he talked about breaking out of the MQL addiction, as well as the more budget for brand. The challenge, I think, is, and this is what I want to ask you about, is, so we all recognize, and as you know, I bang on about awareness, revenue, and trust being the goal of marketing. The challenge then is, And we also know, and I think you've done some work with your clients, that a good brand is a multiplier of the other activities that you do. So if you have a strong brand, your PPC works better because people will see your name amongst the 10 others that are advertising on the same words, and they'll click on you, or there's something you said in that ad, and that's why they'll click on you. But the attribution in B2B is a bit of a fucking shit show anyway. But attribution to brand spend is even harder. What advice do you give other folks about this kind of stuff?
In other words, advice to sort of convince senior leadership, or advice in sort of getting started, or what?
Anybody
what
that comes into this bar, what advice do you give them about justifying their brand initiatives and getting budget for them within their marketing teams?
Yeah, well, drink a lot is one, for sure, because it's going to be a bumpy ride. You know, the calculus that I always advise with clients is that, you know, performance marketing is built around the idea of efficiency. In other words, it's identifying. So one of the things that often gets conflated is demand generation versus demand identification. And so performance marketing is demand identification, where you put out messages across your marketing mix, whatever that marketing mix is, and you identify. You know, I always use it's a bad metaphor, but it's the only one I've been able to come up with. Is I use it. It's, you know, a theater full of people who want soup, and you're the soup provider. And you walk into the theater of people and you go, how many people here want soup? And a number of hands will go up, and you go, great. I can sell them some. Those are the people I can sell soup to right now. And so you go back out, and then you come back in 10 minutes later and you go, how many people want soup? And a few fewer hands, because some got soup and some have smelled the soup and saw how good it was. And so they raised their hands. But it's a fewer number than the first group. And so on and so forth, until you've basically run out of people who want soup. And what you have to do at a certain level is you have to create the demand for soup to begin with. In other words, you have to start to differentiate soup versus other kinds of meals that people would have. And you have to put more people into the theater. And so you have to go outside of the theater, and you have to actually bring more people into the theater that want to sit there and wait for some sort of food to come around. And so it's both of those things are around brand awareness and brand affinity and trust, because you have to trust me that what I'm talking about is valuable, the journey is worth taking, and you have to trust that I'm the one that should bring it to you. So that delivery of value is extremely important. That's where it's a long-term investment. So performance marketing is and always has been sort of an arbitrage of demand. And what we're trying to do with brand marketing is to create the demand, to create the marketplace, to shape and make markets. That's as much of a job of marketing as is identifying the market demand within a particular market. And we lose that sometimes because we get so wrapped around the axle of efficiency for marketing, because most businesses look at marketing like a tax. Can I, you know, how do I cheat at it, and how do I get out of it as cheaply as possible? Instead of saying it can actually add investment value to the entire business by creating the demand for the thing that we're the best in the world at. And so that's the calculus you have to be able to convince somebody of. And if either you're the person that needs to be convinced of it, or you're the person who has to go convince somebody else of it, that's the argument that has to be made to invest at least a little bit into the long-term value investment of brand building.
Yeah. It's that long and short of it thing, isn't it? Les Burnett and other fella that wrote that long and short of it book, isn't it? Is that balance is like hedging your marketing budget between short-term gains, so you are demonstrating progress with demand generation performance marketing, whilst creating a foundation that your future performance marketing will perform better because you're building trust and a brand within the buying cohort, right?
That's right. Because the, you know, and because we go back to that sort of technology has enabled so many more the big companies would call them ankle biters, and we would call them challenger brands, right?
Yeah.
And so we can tend in B2B especially to look at ourselves, because there are typically so few established big, foundational brands in the various industries that B2B addresses, and so many challenger brands, that it's an awareness game, right? So we get lost in the idea that brand is really about making people aware that we exist. And so you get this shouty kind of, idea for most companies, B2B companies, that basically want to shout louder and louder and louder that they exist, so that people, it's like, I'm not trying to tell you that what I do is important. What I'm trying to do is convince you, those that are already know that it's important, that I exist, so that you'll come and become a lead of mine, right? When you discover that you have a need for what it is I provide, and why I'm different than, the big, huge foundational brand that's already out there. And what we lose a lot of is that the big foundational brands, as well as the challenger brands, also have to sell the idea. They have to, in other words, they have to sell the idea of water before I can sell you a boat.
Yeah.
And so that's or I should say, water travel before I can sell you a boat. And we lose, because it feels so long, and it feels so hard, and it feels such a steep hill, that establishing ourselves as an authority in water travel is like, I don't have the time. I got to lean on my competitor for that, because I don't have the time or the budget or the expertise to do that. All I have time for is to basically identify those boaters who are already out there and sell them a new boat.
Yeah, and I thought of a whole bunch of things while you were sharing that. The first one is that all that shouty nonsense could actually be undermining brand trust. So if you're going for the cheap attention, that can actually impact your brand trust. If they click through to something that's not useful, then you're no longer a trusted purveyor of that content, right? So, and I think
right. Well, that's the thing. That's a great point, because not only do you not become a trusted provider of that thing, but you become a distrusted provider of anything.
Yeah. The other thing there about the thought leadership, or convincing people that water travel is possible and exists, is I think that people spend too much time, B2B vendors spend too much time talking about the benefits of their form of water travel, of hover travel, or of oars, or whatever it is that and they forget that this audience doesn't really truly get the value of water travel yet, right? It's a very basic analogy, but and so you have to invest. And I think also we get really bored quickly, don't we, with our own marketing and with our own content marketing, what we're doing. We're like, well, everybody knows this stuff, but of course your buyer doesn't, do they?
That's right. That's exactly right. And then there's so much of that where, and again, especially in B2B, we get tired of saying the same things over and over again, right? And we feel like we're repeating ourselves ad nauseum, and forget that, nobody saw that white paper. You know what I mean? I had a CMO quote me at the end of last year, who said that they had created, something like 300 white papers and ebooks out there extolling the virtues of, their approach, and what, that all meant, and how they did their industry, and trying to be a visionary and a thought leader. And, of all 300 of those ebooks and white papers, 27 of them had more than 10 downloads.
Wow.
And the thing is, we published it, we stuck it out on the website. Therefore, everybody in the world knows, if we were to go re-promote that white paper, or go re-promote that ebook, everybody would know that we're not creating enough content, because everybody would go, that's a repeat. It's like, no, nobody saw it. Nobody saw it. And even if it was successful, nobody saw it.
Yeah. And I also think that we play to the orchestra a bit too much as well, don't we? And we think we wonder what the rest of the goldfish bowl that we swim in is going to think of what we're saying, whereas our buyer isn't in that goldfish bowl, and they have no fucking clue what a CMS is, for example. So I mean, that's a terrible example, because I think most of us, but they don't. they're fumbling around with solving a solution, and they're not entirely sure about what this category is called that's going to solve their problem. So you need to be there foundationally supporting them with, there is a solution that exists, before you start telling them about the hot flippers and flappers that you have on yours, right?
We so often, this is a little inside baseball, I guess, but that we very much, and this, certain industries are more guilty of this than others, I find. Content management, certainly one of them, where we write for our nerdy colleagues. We don't write for customers, right? We write to sort of impress and make arguments against our competitors who are also nerdy colleagues, right? So we make up these things that don't exist really, in the world of content management, right? We made up this thing called headless, because headless is a thing, right? And everybody went, oh, that's the new paradigm. And now it's not the new paradigm anymore, because someone's come up with a new thing, and it's the universal system. And then there's the universal versus headless and the customers don't care, right? The customers, they just want their lives to be easier.
Yeah. I actually, I did a presentation, an event, and then I did a webinar follow-up on this, and I used that very topic as an example, because I was in a web chat group and of CMOs and stuff, loads and loads of people, and there was somebody posted that they were looking for something to do this, and they described a CMS, and I watched this conversation happen between these different CMOs, and at no point did anybody say, it has to be API first, in the cloud, SaaS, headless, or any of that shit, right? They were just, I want to be able to have a workflow and manage describing these images and publish it to this. That's the way, even though this CMS industry, and we picked on CMS because we're both common to it, it's 20 years old. The buyer doesn't know. These new buyers don't know, do they?
Yeah, right. I mean, I can tell you that in the 30 years that I have been working in the world of content and content management and digital asset management, that a customer has never, and I mean never, said, I need a DXP.
Yeah.
And so they just don't.
Well, that seems to be a good way for me to leave you from the bar, I think, before we get into trouble with a lot of our CMS colleagues or friends. But if I wanted to experience this kind of advice online and I couldn't get to the bar, where would I find that, mate?
Well, you'll find us at our little hovel on the web, which we call seventhbear.com. Nice. And it's been a fun ride so far, and we continue to ride it.
Splendid. And if somebody wants a bit more of a one-on-one with you, like I'm having now, maybe they spin the dial on the interwebs, where they're going to find you?
You'll find me on LinkedIn a little bit. Not a little bit, a lot, actually. And you'll find me on Blue Sky. I'm enjoying Blue Sky. I'm actually spending way more time on Blue Sky than I am on Threads. So
nice.
So it's sort of Threads is fading away, as is my usage of Facebook, by the way. I think I posted twice last year on Facebook. It's like,
wow. Yeah.
And I think both of them were either cocktails or food or a sunset or something.
Nice.
I mean,
I love your pictures of the cocktails and food and sunset. So yes,
I've been thinking about bringing back the Friday night concoction.
Oh, you have to. You have to. These cocktails are amazing. They need to be shared with the world. I would certainly help with that endeavor. So I love it. But talking of cocktails, mate, if I come back next week, will you be here?
I guess if they don't fire me, I'll be here. Yeah.
Excellent, man. I'll see you next week.
Okay.
Thank you, Robert. And if you have a topic or question you'd like us to discuss in the safe space that is the bar, or have any feedback on the changes I've made to the podcast, please get in touch at hello@rockstarcmo.com or find us on LinkedIn. So that's a wrap on our visit to the Rose and Rockstar. Thank you for joining us. You can find links to Robert and me in the show notes at rockstarcmo.com. You can also find our blog, newsletter, and all of our previous episodes. Or follow us on LinkedIn at rockstarcmo. On the Rockstar CMO FM podcast this week, Jeff Clark is back in our marketing studio on Wednesday. And as you heard, and make sure that I can be there too, Robert will be back in our virtual bar on Saturday. So hopefully you'll join me for those here on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.